the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this guy is right and lawyers are wrong. Lawyers think, well, I should be paid a lot if I spend a lot of time when clients don't give a rip about how much time an attorney spends. What they care about is the result. Hey everyone, this video might make some lawyers mad, and I don't really care. Frankly, I don't like most lawyers anyway. But I think it's important for you to know how to get a good lawyer at a good cost. A good lawyer at a good cost is not a cheap lawyer. That's a totally different thing. I know you've heard the saying, you get what you pay for. And in a lot of times when you're shopping for legal services, that's true. A cheap lawyer is cheap for a reason. There's not a lot of demand for that attorney. Hence, the cost is just not that great. Hiring an attorney based off cost alone is not a great idea. Now, that can go two ways. I've actually had clients who've come to me and said, Isaac, I love you. I want you to do my will or trust or whatever. But you know what? I'm thinking about going with the other guy that I met because he cost 3 times as much. And I'm going to myself, wait a minute. You're trying to go with a lawyer that costs 3 times as much? Well, what I wasn't understanding is that sometimes people infer that expensive means good, and that's not necessarily the case. So sometimes expensive really just is expensive. So the moral of that story, and I'm going to jump into how to get a good cost on a good lawyer, but I want to say at the outset that price should not be the sole factor in picking a lawyer, whether that's because you think they're really expensive and that infers quality, which I don't think is always true, or whether they're cheap. Just don't go with them just because they're cheap. You get what you pay for. Review your contract with that attorney. If you have a fee agreement, actually look at that agreement. The devil is in the details, right? And I have been shocked, and not in a good way, when I have seen some other attorneys' fee agreements, right? I've seen multi-million dollar fee agreements that were on 2 pages and were incredibly favorable to the attorney who prepared that. That's sharky. They're sharky fee agreements. But really, the devil is in the details in those fee agreements. And I think the most egregious and also common abuse that we see from attorneys and their fee agreements is the minimum billing. So the way this works is, let's say you've got your fee agreement and you're paying your attorney hourly. Well, a lot of times they'll say, look, my minimum billing is 30 minutes. Pay attention to that, because what that means is, if you call that attorney and say, hey, what's the weather like outside? That's a 30-minute phone call. So if you were paying your attorney 400 bucks an hour, hey, what's the weather? Oh, the weather looks good. That was 200 bucks, right? And so be careful in the details and read through all of that and make sure you understand. So wait a minute. If I send you a text, that's going to be my minimum billing of 30 minutes? I'm not okay with that. If I send you an email that's 14 words, that's going to be a minimum billing of 1 hour? I'm not okay with that. So read those details. And again, I'm not saying all attorneys do those kinds of tactics. Um, and if you're convinced that otherwise, your attorney is, a good fit, but he has a minimum billing of a point 0.5 hour for every email, that may not be a deal breaker. You just need to be aware of that so you don't get shocked when you get your invoice. So if, for example, your attorney says, I've got a minimum billing of 30 minutes, well, don't just call them and ask how the weather is. Call them with an agenda and say, hey, I'd like to keep this call within 30 minutes. And within those 30 minutes, I'd like to discuss the following 3 things, and then be organized about it. And don't talk about your golf game or how the Cowboys did last weekend, which is probably not very good. Just stick to the facts, get right to it, and be efficient, because that you're going to get billed 30 minutes regardless. So you might as well get as much value as you can out of that 30 minutes. And by the way, if you do that, you're not going to piss off your lawyer. Your lawyer is fine with that. Most of the time, your lawyer would rather get to the answers, cut to the chase, return some value to you. And the only reason, not the only reason, some of the reason that attorneys have minimum attorney fees is that people take advantage and they like text us like all the time and think that we're like on call 24/7 or something, and they kind of take advantage of us. So I'm not saying all minimum billing, like if it's a minimum point 0.2 for every email or minimum point 0.5 for every call or whatever that I'm not saying as a blanket that's bad, but the devil is in the details. And if that's what your fee agreement with your attorney says, be aware of that so that you can make sure you don't get a shocker when you get that bill. We have a saying in our house, which is every job is easy with the right tool. And lawyers are tools. In fact, some of them are huge tools. And I would just say this: finding the right tool for the job is going to give you cost effective results. So my office is in the Dallas area, and there are, I don't know, thousands of attorneys in the area, right? And there are a handful of them that are general practice lawyers, right? That's like a family medicine doctor and kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. Now, in family medicine, that's awesome because you can go meet with your family doctor and he can kind of help do some issue spotting and things like that, and then maybe send you to a specialist. In the legal field, if you know you need a special type of attorney, skip the general guy, skip the general practice guy, and go straight to the specialist who does what you need. In law, we have kind of two major types of lawyer. We have civil and criminal. And a general kind of does a little bit of civil and a little bit of criminal, and maybe has some on the job training if you have a special issue that maybe he doesn't have a lot of experience with. And if he has to do a lot of on the job training, that means extra money because it's going to take him extra time to make mistakes and do research and learn things the hard way. You would be better off going to the guy, regardless of his hourly rate, going with the guy who is, focused in just the type of law that you need, rather than going to the jack of all trades and master of none. You can find somebody who is extremely specific to what you want done. Let's just say that you are interested in purchasing a franchise of a restaurant. I'm just making something up. I don't know. Franchise of a restaurant. Okay. Right. And you need somebody to advise you on whether or not these contracts with the restaurant franchise is a good deal or a terrible deal. Right. Well, you could go to a general practice attorney and he may say, "Oh, I kind of understand it and I review contracts. Yeah, sure, I'll take a look at it." Well, he's going to charge you a lot, right? Because he hasn't seen that type of thing 1,000 times before. However, in this date and age with the internet, you can go out and find, okay, well, I don't want a general attorney that does a little bit of civil law and a little bit of criminal law. I know I need a civil attorney. And within civil attorney, I really don't need a trial attorney, right? So now I'm narrowing it even more. I don't need a litigator. I don't need a trial attorney. I need a transactions attorney, right? That exists. There are people who do transactions. And here in the Dallas area where there's thousands of attorneys, you can go even more specific than that. You can say, I want a civil transactional attorney who handles restaurants. And you can get even more specific than that and find one that focuses on restaurant franchising. Now, I guarantee you, if you find the attorney who handles civil, transactions, restaurant, franchising, and that's his bread and butter, well, when you whip out your proposed franchising agreements, you go, oh, yeah, I've seen that 1,000 times before. It really doesn't take that much. As long as it has this, that, and this, you're good to go. Well, I don't care if his hourly rate was $500 an hour. On paper, you would say, well, that's a really high fee, but he had the answer in 30 seconds. So, what does it mean to be expensive? If you have the right tool for the job, he knows what to do and he gets you a the right answer, right? Faster and less expensive. So find the right tool for the job. Another tactic that works often is to ask if the attorney will do a flat rate fee. Now, this isn't going to work in every case, but in certain things, like again, a probate case, maybe you want to have your will or your trust done. Maybe you need a demand letter written. I don't know, because your neighbor's fence is leaning into your yard and you just want a harshly worded letter from a lawyer to get your neighbor to act right. Well, you don't need to just write a blank check to your lawyer. You can say, hey, what would you charge me to write a letter? And I'll do it on a flat rate fee. And you'd be surprised at how low that rate is if you ask for a flat rate fee. So don't be afraid to ask, even when you're calling around to law firms, hey, do you guys do flat rate fee? If I just need X, what would the flat rate fee for X be? Consider a contingency fee. So if you are in a litigated matter, like let's say you're suing somebody and you're trying to collect a bunch of money, personal injury case, anything like that, you want to consider a contingency fee lawyer. Now, contingency fee means you will pay a percentage of whatever you win. So if that's zero, well, that's a cheap lawyer. That's free. Because if you get nothing, they get nothing. If you get $1 million, well, they may get some percentage of that. And so that cheap lawyer could be an expensive lawyer because typically a contingency fee lawyer is going to charge a minimum of about 1/3 of whatever you collect. And it's probably going to go up from there. So you're going to pay 33%, 35%, 40%. But like I said, if they don't win and they don't line your pockets, then you're not paying anything. So if that's a contingency fee lawyer, so ask if the lawyer that you're interviewing does do contingency fee cases. Another tactic, let's say you're not talking about, a personal injury type case and it's not a contingency fee case where you're trying to win a bunch of money. What you might do is ask for a cap. So in other words, if you are handling a probate case, it's a breach of contract case, maybe even a divorce, you can say, look, I'll pay you your hourly rate, attorney, but can we cap the expense at whatever it is? So my fees won't exceed 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is. And you would think a lot of attorneys would say, oh, no way, I would never do that. But you know what? If they tell you that there's no way they would agree to a cap, that's telling you something about what they plan on charging you. So even having the conversation about whether or not they would consider a cap gives you pretty good intel about what they plan on charging you in the long run. So ask about a cap. Similar to that, you can ask for a limited or defined scope. So, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a prospective client that comes in and says, Isaac, I want to hire you to handle this lawsuit and to be my attorney in general. Well, I'm going to have to quote you a pretty high retainer deposit to get me to be your attorney if you're asking me, like, to serve in such a vague way, because I have to protect myself. What people don't understand is that when an attorney takes on a case, um, a lot of times we're in it to win it. We can't just stop being your attorney. Maybe a judge has to let us out of the case. So knowing that, if you can say, look, Isaac, I don't want to hire you to be my attorney indefinitely. I just want to hire you to do one, two, three. And that's what my contract with you will say is I'm only going to hire you to do one, two, three. Well, then I feel a little bit more comfortable saying, okay, I know about how much time I'll have in doing those things. I don't need to quote you a really high cost because it's limited in scope. So if you're talking with an attorney, be really clear about exactly the things you want. Don't leave it vague and open-ended and say, hey, if we do a limited scope for just XYZ, what do you anticipate the cost for just that to be? Another one you could try is a hybrid fee arrangement. Now, you actually don't see this very often, but I think they're awesome. So like I'll give you an example, right? I had this client who came in and said, Isaac, I want you to represent me on this trial dealing with this will contest case. And he said, I think it's going to settle. And so he said, I'll make you a deal. Whatever your normal rate is, if you get it settled in less than a month, I'll pay you extra. And if it takes a month to 6 months, I'll pay you your normal rate. And if it takes you longer than 6 months to get my case settled, I'm going to pay you your normal rate, but a little bit less. And I thought, this guy is nuts. If I pick up the phone and settle his case in a week, he's going to end up paying me more. Is this guy crazy? And I asked him, I said, sir, are you really comfortable that if I pick up the phone, make a couple of phone calls, and hammer out a settlement agreement that you agree to, you're going to pay me extra? And he said, Isaac, I don't care how long or how much time you spend on my case. What I do care about is how much am I getting and how quickly can I get it? And if you get a little bit more because you hit it out of the park and you say whatever magic stuff to get my case resolved super fast, what do I care? Go get it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this guy is right and lawyers are wrong. Lawyers think, well, I should be paid a lot if I spend a lot of time, when clients don't give a rip about how much time an attorney spends. What they care about is the result. How quick can I get my money, and how much am I getting? So frankly, I thought, man, that guy is right. And so if I have a prospective client who comes in and says, hey, Isaac, is there some way we can get on the same side of the table in terms of your attorney fees? I start thinking about hybrid options. So, if I meet a certain metric, will you add a little bit more? And if I fail a certain metric, will you deduct a little bit? Sometimes that kind of gets you and your lawyer on the same page, which is, I mean, that's really the goal. Okay, so let's just go ahead and kind of wrap this up. I hope I've convinced you that you don't want a cheap lawyer, right? I mean, you can have good or you can have cheap. You don't want good and cheap. So let's get that out of the way. I've also kind of given you some tactics. You could consider contingency fee. You can consider a hybrid fee, a flat rate fee. It doesn't have to be traditional hourly fee. And I hope I've convinced you that when you're shopping for an attorney, find the right tool for the job. Find the right attorney that kind of has a focus and has a knowledge base on the area of law that you need. And I just want to wrap up by saying that people like to think that lawyers are really expensive, and lawyers can be expensive. But I think most lawyers want to be a good value. We want to feel like we're doing a good thing for our clients. And so expensive to me is something that has a cost with low benefit. But if something has a big cost, but a big benefit, to me, that's not expensive. And when it comes to the real world, and when you're hiring a lawyer, as long as you get the right tool for the job and you pay attention to your agreement and your eyes wide open and you have a limited scope, all of those different tactics that we've talked about today, I think what'll happen is that you're going to get an attorney that maybe isn't cheap, but is a good value. And I think that's what's really important, is getting a big benefit at the lowest out-of-pocket cost to you.